Denise Gilman, clinical professor of law, co-director of the immigration clinic at the University of Texas Law School. The border wall was constructed in such a way that it not only resulted in a taking of property by the federal government, but it also cut landowners off from the river, because the river is the actual border. And the border wall actually comes in as far as a mile in from the river, such that people really effectively lost huge swaths of their land, not just the little area where the border wall went through. And most of the property owners who were affected were sort of small property owners, largely Latino, not affluent landowners. And they lost access to the river, which had economic significance for some who used it to give water to their goats, their small herds of goats, as well as cultural significance. Many people use the river as a recreational spot, but also there are Native American communities along the river who treat the river as a religious and traditional site for ceremonies, and that was impacted. The research that has been done around the border wall has been very exciting because it really has been a multidisciplinary effort here at the University of Texas. I think that collaborative work between researchers in anthropology, law, environmental sciences, geography has really been an effort that has allowed us to dig in to the research with a depth and breadth that reveals the human rights impacts of the border wall in a way that probably could not be done in any other way. We began to receive communications from small landowners, particularly from the Tamez family, which is a family that traces its origins to their Lipa and Apache, and they also trace their land ownership back to the Spanish crown, to the 1700s, and they were very concerned that they understood that a fence was going to be constructed on their land, and so they alerted us to the situation, and then we began to hear from others as well. And I made my first official records request in March of 2008 and didn't really get any response, and so finally the following year, in the spring of 2009, is when we filed the federal court litigation, because under the records statute, the Freedom of Information Act, the government is supposed to provide records within 20 days, and this had been longer than a year. The exciting thing about the decision that we just recently received is very specifically about the idea that the government has to reveal to us which landowners were affected. Getting the names of landowners will help us to establish those disparate impacts more clearly. I expect that when we get a list, we're going to see an awful lot of Latino surnames and very few non-Latino surnames. It'll help us to figure out which property owners had sufficient economic or political influence to avoid having the border fence put on their lands. And there are some emails in the documents that we've already received that indicate that that type of influence was being peddled and did have an impact. Frankly, we just don't have a list of people affected by this border wall, by this huge federal infrastructure project. The government has not been transparent about letting the public know how many people were affected. Who are they? And so this is very important in that regard.